What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Hoops and Stuff podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, and today we're going to be continuing our series that we started in episode 14, and basically we just talked about 5 teams at a time. So we're just going to go by division, and there's more details to the series in episode 14 if you want to go check that out later. But today we're going to be talking about the Southeast Division. Now, this is our last division in the East, and the first team we have in the Southeast is the Heat. Miami Heat did just make the finals over the Celtics, which is amazing for them. They're a really good team, and I really do like the Miami Heat. They're definitely one of my top, I'd say top 5 teams. I really like, I've always liked Jimmy Butler a lot, and he's a phenomenal player. We also are going to see Tyler Herro coming back for Game 3. And he was out for the whole, basically the whole playoffs with that broken hand injury. So he should be coming back for Game 3 of the finals against the Nuggets. And then we've also seen Jimmy Butler going crazy in the playoffs. That's a major thing for the Heat that I want to talk about for a second. Jimmy Butler has been putting up Michael Jordan numbers in the playoffs. You could literally you can say he's the modern day Jordan, I guess. Jimmy Butler is going insane in the playoffs. But games 4, 5, 6, the Celtics won all 3 in a row. So that was a really good comeback for the Celtics, but the Heat did manage to pull it off to make the finals, which was crazy to me because I thought the Celtics were about to come back and win. I was so scared for the Heat. For the Heat, I'm gonna say that they're definitely gonna lose to the Nuggets. The Heat did make a really good run in the playoffs. I mean, obviously, since they're in the finals, they made a phenomenal run. But I say that they're going to lose in 5 or 6 to the Nuggets. The Nuggets are just too good of a team. Jokic is a phenomenal player. Jamal Murray has been doing his thing in the playoffs. And they just have a phenomenal team over there in Denver. I feel like the Miami Heat are better without Tyler Herro because, with the way they've been playing without Tyler Herro, I think that just Max Strus has been doing really good, and Gabe Vincent's been doing really good for the Heat since Tyler Herro has been gone. And I feel like if they didn't have him in the regular season, they would have been playing at the same level because there's not really a third, I would guess you could say, star on the team. Because I would say Tyler Herro's a pretty solid player for the Heat. He shoots the ball a lot. He gets a lot of shots up. So that's going to allow more shots for Jimmy Butler. And obviously Jimmy Butler's a better player than Herro. And the final thing I want to talk about for the Heat is I feel like they should draft maybe a power forward for this year because they do have Kevin Love, but he's obviously getting older. And they should definitely try to get that power forward locked in because that's really the only position that I'd say they kind of need. Our next team is the Hornets, and the first thing we got to talk about, they need LaMelo to stay healthy. LaMelo is a phenomenal player when he does play, but he does deal with a lot of injuries, and they just really need LaMelo healthy. They need him to play close to all 82 games, if not all 82, because he's their star player. He's their superstar. He's that player that you have the highest chance of him being an all-star on your team. He's a phenomenal player. He can shoot, he can finish, he's good. He's a great player. There's no doubt about it. But he's just been dealing with so much injuries, and with the first couple of years of his career, he's been dealing with so many injuries, and you really needed him to fix that. And they do have the second pick in the draft, so they should definitely draft a small forward. I'd say Brandon Miller maybe. Brandon Miller's a really solid player that they could take early in the draft. And this team has a lot of like solid young players. Like they have LaMelo Ball, they have PJ Washington, they have Mark Williams. Like all these players are young players who can perform for you and are gonna get better. And you also have like vets that can help these players get better. Like you have Gordon Hayward who is older. You have Kelly Oubre who's getting up there. He's got quite a bit of experience. So you have players that can help your other younger players develop. I have a question for for the Hornets as a franchise, and it's is Miles Bridges going to be returning? Because obviously we did see Miles Bridges miss all of last season, and currently is not playing still, obviously. But he had his off the court problems, and like nobody really has really talked about it too much lately. But I think that Miles Bridges was a phenomenal player before he got all this stuff like that. Like he before he did all this stuff off the court, he was a phenomenal player. And I think that the Hornets should definitely try to give him a second chance because, like I said, he's a great player to go along with like LaMelo Ball. So if you have both of them on the court at the same time, they're unstoppable. They're a great dynamic duo, and I feel like a second chance is definitely a good idea for Miles Bridges. Even though, yeah, his off the court problems were pretty major, I think that he definitely deserves a second chance. And the final thing that I want to talk about for this Hornets team is I feel like Terry Rozier is a really underrated player. Like a lot of people just overlook him, but he's probably the second best player on the team behind LaMelo. Maybe at at the least he's the third best player, but I'd say he's the second best player on this team. Next up, we have the Magic, and the Magic they have quite a bit of young players. So to start off, they have Paolo Banchero, and I'd say he's probably going to be the future of their team if he lives up to the expectations that that everybody has for him. He's they just drafted him last year. He's still young, obviously. So I definitely think that Paolo could be the future of this franchise, and I think he'll definitely be a great player, even if he does end up going to a new team after his contract's up or whatnot. I don't know, but he's definitely going to be one of the best players on his team wherever he ends up. Another player that I want to talk about is Bol Bol, and I guess you could say he went from like a meme type of player, like one of those players that like he's a fan favorite, but he's just like a meme. Like no, like they don't play him, but like he's what 7'4", like the dude's massive, and he went from that like meme kind of player to a rotational player, and they play him like quite a bit, and he's been doing good. Like he did really good last season, and I really like that for Bol Bol. I've always liked Bol Bol myself, and he is playing pretty solid when they do play him. I'm definitely glad that the Nuggets don't have him anymore because they just like underused him so much because of Jokic being on the team. I think that this Magic roster is going to be really good in a couple years once those young players develop. Like they have Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, like I just said, Cole Anthony, and they have Jalen Suggs, and they have whoever else they draft this year. So I think that they'll definitely be a pretty solid team in the next couple years once those players develop. And I really like Franz Wagner. He looks like he's a pretty solid player so far. And a player that I think that they could trade maybe is Markelle Fultz because they do have a couple of young guards like Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, but Markelle Fultz ever since his career has started, he's been more of like a like you could play him as six man or you could start him. Like he's been like a iffy kind of player. Like you don't know what you're gonna get out of Markelle Fultz, and he had his injury right before he got into the NBA, so he's never really been that great player that they expected him to be. But he's a solid player, but he's definitely not. He's not a superstar. He's not a star. He's not. He's not a great player, but he's good. And the final thing I want to talk about is who the Magic should draft, and I think they should draft any like shooting guard, whoever they can get. I think that they should at the shooting guard position, maybe point guard, because Jalen Suggs is not really looking very good, and he's still young, but like so far, I just feel like he hasn't reached the point that we've expected him to be at by now. It's been a couple years that he's been in the league, and he's still like, I'd say I'd run him off the bench maybe. I mean, they could try to trade him if they want to, but I think that they could just run him off the bench and get a new shooting guard to go at that position. Next up is the Wizards, and I think this is a team that we could see a lot of action from in the off season or maybe at the beginning of next season. I think that we could definitely see a lot of like trades coming from them and whatnot, and trying to pick up some like offering like these better players some good contracts in free agency. But to start off, I want to talk about this one duo that they had that I really do miss. Prime John Wall and Bradley Beal. It was a great duo. They were explosive. John Wall was a phenomenal player in his prime, and Bradley Beal was obviously also a great player, and he still is a good player, just not as good as he used to be, I feel like. And I wish that we could have seen that duo for a longer period of time because they were, like I said, they were phenomenal. And speaking of Beal, I think that maybe it's time for the Wizards to move on from Beal. They've had him for quite a while, and they haven't really gotten anywhere after losing that prime version of John Wall that we've seen. They tried Russell Westbrook, he didn't work out. So I think maybe it's time to move on from Beal too, because although he's a great player, I just don't think he's starting to get older. I don't think that he's not gonna do anything for your team, and obviously everyone's goal is to at least make the playoffs. And this team is just not. They're not up. And they do need a lot of changes. And I think trading away Bradley Beal is the first, or pretty close to the first change that should probably happen. A player that I do really like that I think they should keep around though is Kyle Kuzma, because since he got traded to the Wizards, he's looked really good for them, and he's he did his thing last year. Another player that maybe the Wizards could trade away is Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, they've only had him for a couple of years now, but I think maybe he could possibly end up going to like the Hawks or something. I mean, Porzingis is a solid player, really tall, but I mean, he's not at that level that he used to be at, like when he was on the Knicks or even after he left the Knicks and ended up in Dallas. I think that he was definitely better than he is on the Wizards. The final thing I want to talk about for this team is who they should draft, and I think that they should draft a point guard because they don't really have a solid point guard. Maybe they could draft a center, but I'd say that they should probably go for a point guard because they could trade up for a player like Scoot Henderson possibly, and maybe they end up trading like Porzingis for a high pick and a good, like a solid player. You know what I'm saying? So they could get somebody solid if they try to trade up like to a higher pick. So they could get somebody like Scoot Henderson, like I said. and I feel like they need to go into rebuild mode, and I feel like they're not really doing that right now. The final team in the Southeast Division is the Atlanta Hawks. Coming into the season, this team looked phenomenal. Like I had guesses on them winning going to the finals and winning it all. They looked so good at the beginning of the year, but they did not reach my expectations. And I think a lot of other people had really high expectations for the Hawks too. But I feel like they just let their fans down and even people who were just rooting for them. I think that their first move to becoming that team that people thought they were going to be this year, next year, should be trading for a reliable big man shooter, which is why when I was talking about the Wizards, I suggested Porzingis going to the Hawks because he is he's a really big guy and he can shoot the ball. He's like 7'3". He's in that area around 7'3", I think, and he's a pretty solid shooter. So I think that if they can if they can try to go for Porzingis to go with like Trae Young and Dejounte Murray, I think that that could be a really solid team. We were seeing trade rumors about maybe they were talking about like Trae Young getting traded to a new team, but those rumors have kind of like settled down, and I don't think Trae Young is going anywhere. I think he's in Atlanta to stay for quite a while, and he did have a couple of nice performances in the playoffs, but I mean like if somebody does good in like a couple of games in a row in the playoffs, you can't blame them for your loss. Another thing that would like to talk about for the Hawks is I think that they need to fill a couple of like minor holes for that Trae Young and Dejounte Murray duo to work. Like, I mean, they don't really have a solid like big man that can shoot, like I said, and I think that I think if they do end up trading for Porzingis, I think that they'll end up trading Capella or they'll end up trading John Collins. They're going to trade one of their starting big men if they do try to go after Porzingis. But if they go, if they end up trading John Collins, then they're still gonna have Capella, and I don't think Capella is a very good fit for the team. I think that they should maybe try to trade him, maybe for a new center, or they could try to trade him for a power forward and run Kristaps at center if they do end up getting Kristaps, or if they go the trading Clint Capella route, they could try to run Kristaps at center if that's what he wants to do, and keep John Collins at power forward, or they could run Kristaps at power forward and maybe try to run John Collins at center, but he'd be kind of like a he'd be like a small center, so maybe they could end up trading John Collins away. Maybe they'll end up trading Clint Capella and John Collins away. Is basically my point. But I don't know because I really do like John Collins. He's a phenomenal post player. He dunked on some of the biggest centers in the league, like Joel Embiid or Jarrett Allen. So he's a great player, but I don't know. He definitely can't shoot, so that's why I feel like they should definitely try to bring in Porzingis. If they can fill in these holes, I think they could possibly make the finals next year, and maybe they'll even win it. But it really just depends on how they play. That's gonna be it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe. And let me know down in the comments what you guys think about Porzingis possibly going to the Hawks. Do you think that's a good trade for the Hawks and the Wizards? Do you think it's a good trade for just the Hawks, just the Wizards? Let me know down in the comments. And I'll see you guys next Sunday on the Hoops and Stuff podcast.